I was stationed at the Nellis Base Hospital just outside of Groom Lake, assigned there after my transfer from Fort Detrick. It was a low-profile gig, mostly treating sunstroke, sprains, and the occasional drunk fight. That changed the morning of July 3rd. They called it a containment breach. No details, just a flurry of ambulances and blacked-out Humvees pouring in from the east gate. First guy through the doors had half his face hanging off and glass shards sticking out of his neck like porcupine quills. We weren't briefed, and we were not prepared. Suddenly, triage became survival mode. Blood pools on linoleum, med carts rolling in and out non-stop. Screams that didn't fully sound human. My name is Ellie. I was a trauma nurse, third shift, and had been in the job long enough not to flinch when someone came in half dead. But what we saw that week, none of it felt right. Nothing added up, and it all started with a patient they brought in under the name of Frank C. I can't tell you any more than that. Even though it has been years since this incident, I am still scared that any day now I might get a knock at the door. But let me tell you, they shut this place the fuck down. The guy they brought in had no rank, no serial, just civilian contractor, which meant either intelligence or one of the off-the-book science guys they keep in the bunkers. He came in unconscious, missing his left arm at the shoulder. Burns covered the entire left side of his body, but it wasn't the burns that stood out, it was the color. It was this dark violet tone that didn't look like bruising or tissue necrosis. It looked like ink seeping out from under the skin. They moved him to a private wing in the east corridor. It was one that we never used because it had not passed full renovation. Aside from medical staff, anyone not military related was basically thrown out unless it was life-threatening. I don't know what kind of phony excuse they gave or how they even managed it. It seems like pure bullshit, I know, but I have never seen anything like it in my life. They brought in their own machines, their own monitors. The IV bags they hooked him up with were neon green, glowing faintly even under the halogen lights. I asked what was in them. No answer. One of the army docs told me it was classified biomedical prototyping. I didn't push. The thing was, the meds didn't seem to sedate Frank, not one bit. His vitals would flatline and then spike again. One night, his heart rate dropped to 20 BPM for almost a full minute. Thought we lost him. But when I leaned in to check his pupils, he opened one eye, just the right one. The left one was a ruined socket. The eye looked off. I know that's not helpful, but it wasn't like anything I'd ever seen. The pupil was dilated, but the iris was not brown anymore. It was black, shot through with tiny red threads like spider veins. He blinked once, then flatlined again. I called it in, but by the time the trauma team got there, he was back to stable, and lying there like nothing happened at all. The official story was he had been caught in a lab explosion caused by an electrical short. That did not explain the growing list of symptoms. Muscle spasms without brain activity, shifts in body temperature by 10 degrees in under an hour, skin luminescence. I clocked it one night when I dimmed the lights. He was pretty much fucking glowing. Not metaphorically. His skin gave off this low, rhythmic pulse, like the soft hum of a power transformer. I tried recording it. Phone wouldn't pick up anything but static. It was a fucking stupid idea doing that shit anyway. Could have lost my job or much, much worse. I mean, what was I thinking recording a random patient like that and violating their privacy? Anyone would think I was a trainee. After that, they started posting guards outside his room. These were not MPs that they were stationing outside, either. These guys were full-on private security. Unmarked uniforms, high-grade rifles, and no insignia. I was lucky that the one who caught me was who he was. He snatched the phone and broke it, and told me I was getting off lucky. Got told to focus and do my job, and that he would forget all about what he saw me doing. In any other scenario, I would have called him an asshole, but he did me a favor, and I'm not really sure why. Maybe he was nervous, or maybe they needed as many people as possible on this. Still, I couldn't ignore it, and I started noticing other things too. One of the patients they brought in had this milky fluid leaking from his tear ducts. Another kept repeating a string of numbers under his breath for hours before flatlining. I think it was something like 169424111, I think, but I could be completely wrong. Something like that anyway, but it didn't mean anything to me. But it was always the same sequence. I wrote it down one night and asked one of the other nurses, a guy named Remy, if it meant anything. He went pale and told me never to bring it up ever again. Told me to get rid of it and to not let the guards see. Frank got worse. The burns didn't scab or heal, they shifted. The edges of the damaged tissue started curling inward, like flower petals closing at night, and underneath it was more of that violet-black substance. The specialist doctors they brought in called it deep tissue damage, but I saw it move once. Not spasm, but full-on move, like something crawling just beneath the skin. I reported it to our lead physician on the case. He nodded and said he would escalate to command. The next day, they doubled the guards and replaced the IVs with thicker tubing and reinforced clamps. They started bringing in blood samples and unmarked canisters. When I asked where they were sending the samples, nobody answered. July 7th, early morning. I was prepping his meds when I noticed that the pump was disconnected. The tube had been melted clean through, like acid had eaten it. Frank's vitals were spiking. His temperature was at 105 degrees Fahrenheit, heart rate 150. I reached to check his airway, and he grabbed my wrist. Let me be clear to all of you reading this. Frank had not moved in 4 days, not even a twitch, and now his hand was like a vice. His skin was hot, way too hot, and there was this vibrating tension underneath it, like something coiled. He didn't speak. He opened his mouth, and what came out was sound, but not words. It was this deep, wet crackling noise, like frozen branches snapping underwater. I pulled free, hit the emergency call, but nobody came. I checked the intercom, dead. Power was still on, but the monitors were glitching, readouts flickering, alarms freezing mid-beep. Then he began to rise, not like a person sitting up. His body arched, and the vines, yes, vines, like tendrils, began unfurling from the stump of his amputated arm. They weren't plant vines, not exactly. They moved too fast, too intelligently. They wrapped around the bed rails and lifted him. His legs dangled, his head lolled. The lights blew out, all of them. Room went dark except for the green glow from his skin and those things growing from him. One of them lashed toward me. I ducked and ran straight into the hallway. A guard tried to stop me, but I screamed something about containment breach. He went to check and didn't come back. A second later, the whole wing locked down. Steel doors slammed, warning lights flashed. Over the PA, a code I'd never heard before. Delta 6 quarantine protocol. I stood there choking on the chemical dust, trying to make sense of what I'd just seen. The air was sharp with whatever suppressant they dumped into the room. Some weird mix of ammonia and ozone that stung my nose and eyes. The thing was lying in a curled up mess on the floor, not moving. His vitals were flatlining. The growth, whatever that was still twitching, but dying fast under the foam. I backed into the hallway, not even realizing I was still holding the syringe of Naxalone I grabbed earlier. My hands were shaking. I tried to get someone's attention. A sergeant standing post with an M4 at the ready, but he wouldn't look at me. His eyes were on the hallway corner, like he expected more of them to come crawling out. A man in civilian clothes, a suit with a wire in his ear, brushed past me without a glance and went straight into the room. The door slammed again behind him. No decontamination, no hesitation. That was when I knew. This wasn't new to them. I stumbled into the break room. My scrubs were soaked through with sweat and God knows what else. The skin on my neck was burning where the dust had touched open scratches. I grabbed a water bottle from the fridge, someone else's because I did not care, and downed the whole thing in 2 gulps. I could hear shouting 2 rooms over, behind glass. I wasn't supposed to hear what they were saying, but I picked up pieces. Still mobile. No, we were told it couldn't replicate. 3 dead, not including. That was enough. I left the bottle on the floor and headed to the admin wing. I needed to file an incident report, just something to put it down in writing before someone made it all disappear. I passed the nurse's station. Empty. No chatter, no coffee, no one charting. The place was usually buzzing, no matter what time it was. In the admin office, I logged in. My access had not been revoked yet. I typed the basic summary. Respiratory event. Unknown complication with infusion. Possible reaction. I stopped at reaction. That word wasn't big enough. There wasn't a drop-down menu for subject grew appendages and became aggressive. I deleted the sentence and instead wrote, patient experienced acute neurological distress, leading to severe muscular convulsions and aggressive behavior. Infusion paused. Emergency code initiated. Patient status unknown. That was as close to the truth as I could get without redacting myself. I printed a copy, one copy, that's all I dared to do, and then I slid it into my locker, behind the photos and the travel-sized deodorant I never used. I don't know what good I thought it would do. By the time I got back to the ward, the room was sealed off with blackout curtains and 2 MPs standing outside. I didn't ask questions. I walked past them and went to the nurse's bathroom. Then I locked the door and turned on the faucet, just to drown out the sound of my own breathing. I looked in the mirror and did not recognize the face staring back. Red eyes, gray skin. I wasn't just feeling sick, I was just emptied out. Like I'd seen something I wasn't supposed to, and now part of me was gone. That night, they moved all remaining patients from the wing. Didn't say why. I overheard a conversation about atmospheric pressure differentials in that hallway. It was all just bullshit jargon that sounded like someone trying too hard to lie. I checked the log. No barometric anomalies, no HVAC flags, nothing wrong with the environment. It was something in him, in his blood. Next morning, they told me I'd been reassigned. No notice, no conversation, just a paper slip and a room number. When I showed up, it wasn't a patient care room. It was a desk, a screen, security feed access, nothing medical. I sat there for 6 hours watching live feeds of different rooms in the lower levels. Most were empty, some were not. Some had things in them that didn't move right. One of the feeds was black and white with no audio. It showed a holding room with a gurney. Someone was strapped to it, a female maybe. Her face was covered with gauze, but I recognized the twitching, the same shoulder spasms, same posture. I clicked the log. She had been transferred in 2 days ago, name redacted, from the cold storage wing. She hadn't exploded into vines. She didn't glow or hover or anything out of a horror movie, but she wasn't sleeping either. Her chest didn't rise or fall. Her limbs didn't shift, but her eyes were open. And every 5 minutes, like clockwork, she blinked. No breathing, no movement, just the blink. They left her in that room for 12 hours straight. At hour 13, a doctor entered in a sealed suit. They were not military. Some kind of private contractor probably. The feed cut out 5 seconds later. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the cocktail they'd given him, the neon bags, the insistence on keeping him under. I remembered how fast his levels were recovering and how his red cell count had doubled in hours. It wasn't just healing, it was replication, some kind of growth. I started to wonder if the explosion at Groom Lake was even an accident, or if it was containment, like someone had seen where this was headed and tried to burn it all down before it got out. But it didn't work, because whatever it was had still in them, still quiet, still waiting. A week later I was released, no warning, no follow-up, just a phone call saying I'd been rotated out and that my NDA would be reinforced. I got a check, a discharge paper with no explanation, and an escort to the gate. That was it. Now I'm back at home in a quiet little town, just renting a room, and trying not to think about what's under the desert. But sometimes I wake up in a sweat, thinking about those eyes on the monitor, that patient who wasn't breathing, but still blinked every 5 minutes, like a timer counting down. If you've read this far, just remember, if you hear about a respiratory virus spreading from a facility near Nevada, or a rare blood condition turning up in clusters of military families, it's some kind of experiment or something they're covering up. Whatever they tell you it is, whatever they want you to believe, it's not true. Hey, I hope you've enjoyed the story so far. If you do and you want to hear more, please leave a like and subscribe to my channel, and leave a comment down below, as it lets the algorithm know that you like my content and it promotes it to more people. My goal for the channel is to hit 50,000 subscribers, and we're closing in fast, so thank you, and back to the stories. Don't know if it's the same creature, but I managed to meet my great-grandfather's aunt's grandson. Really unclear how I was related to him since I was only 8 or so. Anyway, he's an Arche who practically lived like a pioneer half of the time, in the woods hunting, skinning, trapping, the whole 9 yards. Had a huge collection of firearms, likely a dozen revolvers, and at least a couple dozen long guns. I know little of gun terminology, and time doesn't make it easier to identify them, but I am confident it was an assortment of old shotguns and rifles, some of them double-barreled or over-under. I think some were even the long ones that are the first semi-automatic rifles. This is a big log and stone cabin, with lots of room for him to display every piece in its own memorial. He kept each individual gun with trophies he had gotten with that gun. Bear heads, panther heads, antlers ranging from pencils to baseball bats. If a gun had done something, it would show. Except for 3, which were left in the corner, barely visible and hidden behind the many trophies associated with the other members of his collection. I thought the guns looked sad. In that corner, they were completely ignored, and it was obvious that he did not care if he forgot that they ever existed, tucked away back there, cobwebs in the barrels and everything. Ask him why those guns that seem just as good as the other ones don't have any achievements. He grabs me by my shoulders, pushes me into a seat, and pulls up a stool which he sits on. He starts telling me about those 3 guns, rifle, shotgun, and revolver, failed him in such a manner that they don't deserve a chance to prove themselves. He was, kinda odd like that. He tells me about being in a woods, and how things work a bit differently out in the wilderness than cozied up in civilization. He says he's been a lot of places, hiked up and done laps in the Appalachian, where the beasts have a kind of endurance that separated them from the others. Reminder, this is all secondhand. Never been out there and had spoopy stuff happen, or hear similar stories from other relatives. When he traveled up the Mississippi, the beasts were faster and harder to track. He never described those creatures as being abnormal, but the next one he insisted was not meant to exist in a world with men. He was out enough that it was pretty common for him to be going through an area he had passed through before on separate trips. On his 3rd trip through one of those areas, he became aware he had garnered the attention of something. I think it did creep him out and make him uneasy, but the man had that revolver, rifle, and shotgun with him each of those times. The creature he found there wasn't swift like the stuff by the rivers, nor was it undaunted by him as the mountains creatures were. On the 4th trip through the area, he found proof something in the area was interested in him. First, he found tracks within whatever remained of earlier passes through. Soon though, new tracks were making trails to lure him down unexplored trails that he had never been through. At that point, he noticed there was never, not even one set of tracks from anything in that area. No boar passed through, no deer or bear, no bobcats or varmint. 6th time, he had a confrontation with it, whatever it was. He had come to a 2-way fork with a trail split, one way being his former route, and the other being a mimicry of the ones he had created. He decided for the first time to go down the strange, imposter trail. It was only a few 100 feet before he decided he had to turn around. He did not know where this path was going to lead him, or when he would reach any open ground. When he did, about halfway back to the fork, the bushes to his right rustled, and the undergrowth tore and snapped from something. No blood and copper smell or some BS like that. As he entered sight of where the trail had split, some thing strolled out of the foliage it had remained concealed in for so long. It didn't move in the purposeful, measured manner things usually move in. He said it was more like a rattlesnake, rattling its tail, a kind of fluid, smooth movement that could just as easily be the end of it moving or the beginning. I'm not quite sure I understand what that means. He takes a good look at this thing and is disgusted. It is a blight on nature, something every other beast would shun. It is not a boar nor bear, carries not the crown of deer or the darkness of panthers. And the thing is downright spoopy, so he does what any sensible person would do. He fires the double-barreled shotgun at its right hip. Immediately, the thing lurches forward and bits of flesh, fur, and blood spatter around. Then it stumbles backwards and leans into the bushes the thing wobbled out of in a slightly less slender manner. Right now, the thing is making all fucking kinds of noise, growling and wild shrieking, unsettling laughter, and mumbled calls that might have been words, but might just as likely have been gibberish. Started reloading the shotgun, but just dropped it. The way the thing scrambled after that shot it took demonstrated the shotgun did not penetrate its hide well enough, and so the shotgun failed him forever. He was whipping the revolver out of his pants tactical pocket belt holster when that smell started. Smelled like a handful of pennies that were stuck up a dog's ass, but without the shitty ass smell. Just the smell from being round a smelly dog. Now he had his revolver out and ready, so he pushed the bush out of his way so he could see the thing stroll towards one of the other paths it had made. He shot 6 times, 2 misses, 1 went through the neck and would likely have went out the chin. 1 hit where the heart would be if it was on the right, and 2 into the shoulder and shoulder blade. Thing gave 0 fucks and scooted on. He is pissed. The thing has shrugged off all of the hits it took and just decided to go on its way. Fuck you, revolver. Rifle. Don't be a failure like those 2. Rifle out. It's not really going anywhere too fast, so he takes a few moments to get a look at the thing. He sees the spots where his revolver shots went in, but they seem like they went through the fur and hide. They got caught in it and caught up like a stretched rubber band. Mangled mess of fur keeps anything from penetrating deep. Dunno what the hell you are, but you better not teach no bucks how to do that, you mangy mutton mannequin. What did you call it? 4 shots from the rifle all target that spot on the shoulder where 2 revolver rounds hit. They all hit, but do little more than making it a little scattering of bulb patches where the fur ripped in tangles. Fuck that thing. The fur jammed into the bullet holes, and the mess of fur around them are soaking up the majority of what might have been bleeding. Bloodied some fur that likely had more fur grow over it. Those guns never accomplished anything, and never will. Then he was wanted somewhere, and had to stop there. Not much of a finish, but I never got the chance to see if there was anything more that happened. Last month, my husband and I finally bought our dream house. It is on the edge of a large forest and I love it. It's like a little paradise hidden by the large pine trees that grow on the premises. I honestly don't know where my backyard ends and the forest starts. The house is everything I've ever dreamed of. I'm a musician and usually I work from home, so for me, the transition out of New York City and into the country was not too big. My husband, however, had to quit his job. He gave notice last week and still has 1 week to go. We had to leave our old apartment a few days ago, so for the time being, he stays with a friend in the city, while I have already moved to our new house. This week, it would just be me and our 2 dogs. As fate would have it, some strange things have started to happen. On Sunday, I was unpacking boxes and storing some items in the basement, along with other unused stuff. The basement is cold and windowless, not much bigger than a walk-in closet. I walked down the wooden stairs and dropped the box in a corner when I noticed there was a small hatch on the wall under the staircase. I noticed there was only a latch on it to lock it from the outside. I wondered if it could be a door, but the opening was quite narrow, maybe just big enough for a small person, such as myself, to fit. I opened it up anyway. There wasn't really anything to see though. It was dark inside, and the light from the basement was way too dim to light it at all. From inside came a clicking or snapping kind of noise, not rhythmic, but consistent. I thought maybe it was some type of machine. I did not dare stick my head or hand in for fear of getting electrocuted or something. So I shut the hatch and figured I would take a look when I'd unpacked my flashlight. The following days, things got pretty weird. On Monday, the dogs were going nuts. As soon as the first one stopped barking, the other one would start again. They were just barking into nothing. Dark corners of the ceilings and rooms that weren't lit. Tuesday, the dogs had settled down, but that night, while making dinner, I heard the same clicking that I had heard coming from the space behind the hatch. It was coming from a corner in the living room, a dark area barely illuminated by the light from the kitchen. I approached quietly, but as I was about to flip the light switch, one of the dogs flew past me and charged at the corner, barking. Whatever was making the noise stopped. I turned on the light, but nothing was there. I called my husband that night and told him about the weird noise. He said he would look into it when he got to the house. That night, I was sleeping soundly when one of the dogs started scratching at my bedroom door. I had just painted the door, so I groaned as I heard the dog's nails dragging across the fresh paint, but I was so tired I immediately drifted back to sleep without letting him in. When I woke up, I remembered my dog scratching at the door, and I cursed and hastily got up to check how badly he'd ruined the paint, but both the dogs were in my bedroom. When I went down for breakfast, I noticed the bowl of dog food was completely empty, even though I'd just refilled it the night before. I called my husband that evening and told him I thought we had an infestation of some sort. You might think that I would have been scared at this point, but I had not quite connected the dots in my head. After calling my husband, I sat down with a book and a glass of wine out on the porch. I hadn't really noticed how exhausted I was from unpacking. Not 10 minutes into reading, I fell asleep. It must have been past midnight when I woke up from the motion-activated lights in the backyard switching on. Half asleep, I turned to look, and what I saw shocked me wide awake. About 30 feet away stood a tall, slender figure hunched over, seeming to be drinking from the bird bath in the garden. For a few seconds, I just sat there, frozen in fear, watching the figure drink. It had long, thin limbs, and its skin was pitch black. It was like a shadow that just rose from the pavement and became a person. Then it stopped drinking and lifted its head to look at me, and I was able to make out a mouthful of teeth. Its two clouded grey eyes looked right at me, and for a second I thought it intended to attack. But the figure just backed away into the darkness, where it became immediately invisible. The leaves rustled, farther and farther into the woods, and it was gone. I ran inside and locked myself and the dogs in the bathroom until sunrise. Then I called my husband and told him everything. He said he would come over ASAP. In the meantime, I unpacked some more boxes today to try and distract myself, but while putting more boxes in the basement, I discovered that the hatch was open. I had definitely closed the latch on Sunday, but I must have forgotten to lock it. In that very moment, I remembered the clicking sounds and the scratching at the bedroom door, and I put two and two together. I think whatever was in there, it's out now. Years ago, when I was 8 years old, my family lived in this big weird house, kind of on the edge of a small town. The school district was in the middle of a big restructuring, so even though we were only a couple of grades apart, my brother and I went to different schools and took different buses. This left me as the last person to leave in the morning, and the first person to get home in the afternoon, which meant that it was my job to make sure all the lights were off and the door was locked. One morning, I noticed the basement door was open, and the light was on, so before I left, I turned off the light and closed the door. When I got home that afternoon, the light was on, and the door was open again. I just assumed that I'd forgotten to actually take care of it when I noticed it in the morning, so I went over to turn off the light and close the door. When I got to the top of the basement stairs, I looked, and there was a big shadowy male figure towards the bottom of the staircase. I freaked out, slammed the door, and pushed a bunch of boxes against it, and then went and hid in my closet. For months, I did not tell my family because I was positive what I had seen was a ghost and did not think anyone would believe me. Then, about a year after that incident, my mom and her boyfriend realized that small amounts of money had been going missing from months, totaling around $800 to $900, but never more than $60 at once. So we all walked around the house with flashlights, trying to figure out how they could have gotten in. Turns out, some creep was climbing in through a small hole in the outside of the house, shimmying through a crawlspace, then coming up into the house through the basement. Realizing I had been alone in the house with him on at least one occasion was one of the worst, most terrifying moments I've ever had. Junior year of college. Lived in the oldest residential dorm on campus. Lots of ghost stories about dorm. I shrugged them off. Basement was creepy though. Unfinished. Ugly cement walls and floors. Cobwebs. Laundry facilities were down there, and people would always try to get laundry done before it got too late at night, because it was so creepy. Also a locked door in the basement. I had a proclivity for exploring in college, and picked many locks to get into some fun places. Never had any luck with this one though, which was a bummer because I was very curious of it. It was kinda in the corner of the basement, and could not have led to a very large room at all. It seemed so random, almost like a broom closet, but it wouldn't have made much sense to have a utility closet in the basement. Tried many unsuccessful times to get into that door. One day, after several long nights up past midnight to finish assignments, finally got work done early, and was looking forward to some good sleep. Then a friend called with a personal problem, and I walked to meet them. Then another friend called. Then after 1 a.m., a third messaged me. Not a sociable person, so it was mentally draining helping 3 friends in one night. It was such a strange, unlucky coincidence that 3 people needed me in one night, particularly in the one night I was looking forward to early sleep. 2:30 a.m., walking back to dorm. fumbling with keys to get in the building. Felt this weird tingle on the back of my neck and sudden overwhelming desire to go down to the basement. At first thought, remembering that left my laundry in the wash or something, but then I swear, I felt a voice say, "Come down to the basement." Got into the building and just stood there, staring at the steps to the basement. It made no sense to go down there. Prickling feeling on my neck remained, and I swear I again felt a voice in my head, urging me to go down to the basement, just for a moment. Went downstairs to the basement, turned on the lights, saw no one at the washing machine, nothing. Just stood in the middle of the basement floor, waiting a second or two for I don't know what. I felt like an idiot, but whatever. I was sleepy, and it was time for bed. I turned around to go back up the stairs, when I saw the locked door was wide open. Almost ran forward into it, but as I got closer, I realized my assumption was right. It was a tiny room, barely bigger than a closet, but it was empty. Well, almost empty. It oddly had a single desk, like the small single desk for elementary school kids. So odd, so out of place. From the ceiling, a single old light bulb was hanging over top of the desk. The only other thing in the room, beside the desk, was an old beat-up computer chair, the kind that spins, and that damn chair was spinning, slowly, but steadily enough that it wasn't from a draft. No one else in the basement, no one else in this weird tiny room, and it was spinning. Sprinted away up the stairs, sprinted up the 3 flights to my dorm, slammed my door shut and jumped into bed. I never tried picking that door open again, even in the safety of daytime, but I never again saw it opened, and I asked around without luck to see if anyone else ever saw in there. Sorry if that's a lame paranormal story, but it's 100% true, and really disturbs me thinking about it. In my sleepy state, I was a bit too eager to obey the summons to the basement.